we run field experiments and we leave in long-term moorings in sea ice around Antarctica to look at how the ocean affects the way the ice grows. And so we need to know what the temperatures are, obviously, but we also need to know the currents and the mixing and where the water has come from, because there's a big role in ice shelves, the big floating sort of extensions of glaciers down in Antarctica, and that really influences the way the ocean works and its propensity for generating new sea ice. I was recently in Norway visiting colleagues there that do what we do in the Antarctic. They do it in the Arctic, and they're having to change the way they work. Basically, they would go out, they would set up camps as we do on the ice, and they'd put instrumentation like this and like the turbulence profilers. They can almost not do that now because the ice is so sort of fragile, thin, fast-moving, unstable. So there are massive changes in the Arctic. It gets complicated because we're not seeing those changes in the Antarctic, and so that confuses people. But they're radically different systems. You know, one is an ocean surrounded by land, and the other is land with the ice is around the edge of it, and that system is then separated from the rest of the world by the Antarctic circumpolar current. So they're very different at those sorts of scales. But to me, I think it's one of the big signals to say that climate change is on, and these are the scales of effect that we'll see.
Stop that.
The predictions for changes in ocean chemistry are pretty radical over the next few decades. People were talking about changes in the global oceans by the end of this century. So potentially the environment is changing faster than the species will be able to adapt, and way faster than has been seen down there in the last, hundreds of thousands of years. One of the major things that's against these animals is that they've been living in a really, really stable system for a very long time. I mean, I said that the seawater was minus 1.92, and pretty much that's how it stays at those high latitude Ross Sea regions for the whole year. Whereas if you compare that to off the New Zealand coast, then the seawater changes by degrees and degrees just from summer to winter. and it will also change if you're in the shallows during the day as well, like especially in tide pools and things like that. So if we get changes in seawater temperature, like have been predicted over the next 100 years, then whether or not the animals that have evolved to living in a very narrow little window of temperature are going to be able to adapt or acclimate, or how resilient they are to that kind of change is, we're not really sure. So I think that's a big push, is to get out there and do some really good fundamental research to try and understand how they work now and how they respond to things like changes in light conditions, which relate to changes in sea ice conditions. What might happen if the oceans suddenly become quite a lot more acidic. So some of our work has been trying to tease that apart, and also to try and tease apart how a change in seawater chemistry might have an effect on those animals as well, and how they metabolise and how they work. So we did some experiments where we brought back some really common Antarctic shellfish, and we set up a cold water ocean acidification facility at Mahanga Bay, just around the harbour here, and we manipulated the seawater conditions so that they were as would be predicted for the end of this century. So we lowered the pH by bubbling CO2 into the water, and then we looked at how that affected these shellfish and their functioning over the following 4 months. And we found that basically the animals that had been held at lower pH were breathing much faster than what they would if they were in their normal environment. They also changed a few functions, so they can produce these things called stress proteins, and we measured those, and they were much higher, at a much higher level at the end of that 4 months than what they were naturally. And also they produce these enzymes called chitin synthase enzymes, and the genes that code for those, the levels were upregulated. So essentially that means that there were much higher levels of this chitin synthase gene in the animals that were at the low pH than at the control levels, like at the normal Antarctic levels. And the relevance of that is that those animals, their shell structure and their ability to make the basic shell, was being affected under those kinds of conditions. So while we didn't get any mortality of the animals over that 4-month period, which was promising, we're not really sure whether or not those animals will be able to sustain that, breathing faster and having to put more energy into maintaining their shells and that kind of thing over a longer time period. Because basically Antarctic animals are, their energy levels are going into reproducing, growing and feeding and surviving, basically. So if they have to put more energy into maintaining their shells and just basically maintaining basic metabolism, then that's less energy that's available to go into growing and reproducing. So that can have pretty major implications for the population further down the track.
I used to walk on the surface of the earth, sailing my ship since the day of my birth. So many roads that could lead you to the nose. This was shameless superstitions reveal the real lost day, when all around the world people start sinking their drum. Then some wonder where does the pulsation come from. Jailbreak the world, go find your way to freedom. See, they're not the ones spreading the verb anymore. Open doors, we're heading to the true core. Electricity every time, everywhere. And they're coming from all over the galaxies. We on here for the best part of the story. 360. We're losing gravity. Fasten your seatbelt and get ready to be set free. It's coming from the source of your heartbeat, feeding your brain with its very own music. Intergalactic message to the Inquisition. The universe don't bend when facing your calculations. Make the jump on the cosmologic ladder. We got a being from another kind of player. Please show them all how do you run your spaceship. Yeah, I don't give a shit about the holy laws of physics. Jailbreak the world, go find your way to freedom. See, they're not the ones spreading the verb anymore. Open doors, we're heading to the true core. Electricity every time, everywhere. And they're coming from all over the galaxies. We on here for the best part of the story. 360. We're losing gravity. Fasten your seatbelt and get ready to be set free.